Well, welcome back. We're now talking to Michael Sukkar, who is the chairman of the Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security. So, Michael, thanks for being with us.
G'day, gentlemen. Great to be with you.
Michael, one thing I'd like to ask, I noticed that you supported Peter Dutton's comments in relation to Malcolm Fraser. Now, this is no secret, of course. You come from a Lebanese family. So what should Malcolm Fraser have done differently in your view?
Well, good question, Peter, that many other journalists haven't actually asked. I mean, we've had many waves of migration from Lebanon, really all the way back to the 1800s, all the way really till the present day. Where Malcolm Fraser went wrong, and again it was wrong in practice rather than wrong in principle, was a policy called the Lebanese concession. And in essence, during the Lebanese Civil War, which was a very bloody civil war, a concession was provided for, in a sense, family reunion for those who had family members in Australia. Now, in the end, the Lebanese concession was shut down prematurely, and it was shut down by the Fraser government itself because the vetting and screening processes, in a sense, went out the window if you could establish with a relatively tenuous connection that you had a relative in Australia. And it got to the point where, you know, you had distant cousins and very, very distant relatives claiming an ability to come to Australia. And really where we went wrong was that I think the success of the Australian migration system has been a focus and emphasis on skills, a focus and emphasis on those who are able to in a sense, join our society and, you know, who are able to join the melting pot, so to speak. But during the Lebanese concession, which was shut down early by the Fraser government, in the end, there were many people that were accessing the scheme who really didn't fulfil that criteria. Now, I want to preface my comments by saying the vast majority of Lebanese Australians, I think, can trace their lineage back to somebody who absolutely met that criteria and who are wonderful Australians, and of course I'm one of them, so I'm a bit biased. But we also do have to face up to difficult facts, and as a Lebanese Australian, I am very happy to face up to the fact that representing somewhere around 1% of the Australian population, but 66% of those who have recently been charged with a terrorism offence suggests to me that there was a problem. And if we don't face up to those things, then we're likely to make those same mistakes. So luckily, the Australian migration program is very much skills-based. We have very thorough screening and vetting. So it's, you know, not likely or really possible under the current settings. But if we don't acknowledge those issues, then we're bound to make the same mistakes in the future as we did in the past, and the mistakes that Malcolm Fraser conceded by shutting down the program early.
So in other words, it was a vetting and screening problem. So it wouldn't apply in relation to any Syrian refugees that are coming here because you believe that the current system is better than when it operated then?
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. Our current system, I mean, one of the things we've been accused of is being slow in bringing in the 12,000 Syrian persecuted minorities that we committed to bring in. We're about halfway there, so we've brought in about 6,000, and we've had a lot of criticism that that's been too slow, but part of the reason has been that we have thoroughly vetted and screened those who have arrived. We will thoroughly screen and vet those remaining 6,000 to come in under the scheme, and one of the scary statistics was that of those who have applied to be brought into that intake, 22 have been knocked back for security reasons. Now, 22 people, as we've seen, can wreak absolute havoc in a society like ours. So thankfully we do have those screening processes, but we can't be complacent, and we've got to make sure that we always rededicate ourselves to doing it as well in the future as we are currently and as we have in most of our history.
Michael, you, as I said, are chairman of the Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security. I guess one of the concerns that Australians have is the lone wolf problem. So I just wondered, how are we dealing with that? Because that is homegrown terrorism, we all know, and we've seen this in Nice and a few other parts of the world. So how are we tackling that? How are we dealing with that? Because I think our security alarm system, or whatever you call it, is currently still probable.
Yeah, look, the lone wolf phenomenon is probably the most troubling thing that our security agencies deal with. You see in Australia and in other jurisdictions where you have groups of people who are colluding together and who may be using digital means to communicate with each other, our security agencies have an ability to, in lots of cases, trace those people, watch them, and preemptively ensure that they don't undertake the catastrophic events that they like. For a lone wolf attack where you may have a teenager, as we've seen in the Parramatta police station shooting, a teenager who's literally getting radicalised behind a computer screen, it's much more difficult because often the parents of that particular child, or it may not be a child, it may be an adult, but the family members of that person may not be able to see it themselves. So there's a lot of human intelligence that we use to try and ensure that anybody that's potentially on the radar, we're keeping a close eye on. But this is an inexact science, and this is why, as part of my committee, gentlemen, my view is we must give our agencies all of the powers that they need, because they are dealing with a rapidly changing security environment. And scarily, for lone wolves, we've seen instances where a perfectly normal person is getting radicalised in really quick time. We're talking a matter of a few months, and that is obviously a huge risk, and it's much harder to get them on the radar. So that's a long-winded way of not really answering your question, Peter, other than to say it is the most difficult situation that our agencies are trying to grapple with at the moment.
What's it like being the chairman of that group? Are you're finding that getting all the briefings that you need to really understand what's going on? Just tell us a bit about the process, because you're relatively new to it, but it's a very challenging and important job. Says something about your future, I'd have to say as well, but tell us about it.
Well, Peter, it's an oversight committee, so our role is really to scrutinise new legislation, to, in a sense, have a close relationship with all of the agencies and make sure that they're able to deal with the emerging threats as and when they arise. And I suppose my philosophy in coming into this job was to say to the agencies, anything that you reasonably need to keep Australians safe, I will fight for, and I've been very lucky that to date the committee has backed me up in that. One of the reviews that we have just undertaken and we've really strongly supported is the post-sentence detention regime for terrorist offenders who, once they get to the end of their sentence, if they're not rehabilitated, if they still face or they still are a threat to our society, then we can now, or the Attorney General can now make an application to have them detained post-sentence and up to a period of 3 years. And then if at the end of that 3-year period the terrorist offender still isn't rehabilitated, then we can apply for another 3 years, and so on and so forth. And that is a way in which our laws are trying to keep up with the emerging threats. And I've got to give credit to our Prime Minister. He's really given us his imprimatur with that legislation, quite novel. We've obviously had it at a state level with sexual offenders, pedophiles, a post-sentence detention regime. Now we're extending it at a federal level to terrorist offenders, and that's just one example of the role of the committee. We've scrutinised that, we've made a number of recommendations, but in the end we are strongly supporting it. And as I said, I think the overarching job is to make sure that we're, on one hand, protecting the liberties of Australians, but on the other, making sure they're safe as well and giving our agencies what they need to do that.
Michael, I've got just a couple of quick ones from you. The backpacker is going through, is it? Are you happy with that, the 15%, or is it a done deal now?
Yeah, I was happy with that, Peter. I think, 80% of something is better than 100% of nothing.
Yep.
And the reality was that due to a previous Administrative Appeals Tribunal decision, the tax rate, if the government didn't intervene, was going to be 32.5%. That was obviously uncompetitive. The government stepped in to say, no, we will fix this to make sure that we don't have fruit rotting on trees.
Yeah.
The Labor Party, who are seemingly now taking economic advice from Jackie Lambie, thought that they would frustrate that in the Senate, but we found a way through, and I think 15% is a sensible outcome under the circumstances.
And one more, and that is the ABCC. Is it still alive? Still a good chance of getting it done?
Every time I bump into a senator today, the first thing I say is, how are we looking on ABCC? And they all give me a typical politician's answer, and they don't answer me, really.
Oh, shameful, aren't they?
Look, I would never do that myself. But most of them are cautiously optimistic. But with the machinations of the Senate, which being in the House of Representatives, I don't fully understand, I must admit. I wouldn't. I won't be putting my house on it just yet, but I'm really hoping that it.
Can I throw in one more? We've got one very fast one. What about the pollies who were told that they couldn't have their life passes for travelling around the country by plane? For some reason, they can't get that through this year. It's got to wait for next year. And some of them are taking advantage. Not me, by the way. You know anything about?
That's a disclaimer.
I'll give you 10 seconds to answer. Is that good, bad news, or otherwise?
Look, I think when it comes to savings, we've got much bigger savings measures in the Senate, but we'll get there, Peter, rest assured.
Okay.
Michael, thank you very much for your time, and good luck with the work with your committee.
Good on you, Michael.
Thanks very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, Michael.